So I'm going to call us to order at 6 o'clock. Okay. Our first order of business is public comment. If you want to raise your virtual hand, you have a minute and a half and we will start. Nancy.
Thank you. I'm coming to you in the wake of May 10th Starksboro special town meeting where our voters voted unanimously to support withdrawal and to support a second article with that had some conditions in it that would authorize our select board to terminate withdrawal. I'm speaking to you tonight in the hopes that you will take my statement that I'll send to Dawn and make sure that it appears in the meeting minutes in its entirety. I'm speaking on behalf of the Starksboro Save Our Schools Committee in the hopes to respond to the information provided on June 28th by the superintendent on the impact of Starksboro's withdrawal from MAUSD. We have requested information from the superintendent's office in order to respond to his report, but we haven't yet received that information. Although we haven't been able to get the information yet, we hope that board members are asking these questions about what Patrick presented at the June 28th meeting. How could it be true that losing 117 Robinson students would lead to a 17% tax increase on a $200,000 assessment for the other towns? Since Starksboro has said it would only withdraw if voters approve the merger, because merging would mean we would lose the right to vote on the future of our elementary school after the first 4 years, how could the net tax impact of withdrawal be calculated without first calculating the tax impact of merging? Why would the superintendent assume in his presentation that fewer than 100% of 9 through 12 grade students would attend Mount Abraham Union Middle High School if Starksboro withdraws? And what are the other assumptions behind the superintendent's tax impact and other projections that he gave on the 28th? What are the assumptions related to timing, the actual year that the merger would take effect if voters approve it, and the actual year that Starksboro would be withdrawn if the merger takes effect? What are the assumptions related to the spending threshold, to the weighting study implications and its implementation timeline? What are the assumptions related to Act 173, to the yield and the state funding formula for the years beginning with the start of merger and of withdrawal? What are the assumptions related to how the legislature will handle the hold harmless provision going forward? What are the assumptions related to the number of years that a merged district would be funding 2 superintendents? What are the assumptions related to the increased cost of transportation in a merged district? And what are the assumptions related to decisions that a new Starksboro board would make concerning whether or not to offer any form of school choice? We appreciate all of the efforts that the board is making to make sure that our communities have thorough and clear information before the ratification vote on August 9th. And we are hoping that this evening we can begin to work collaboratively on scheduling, planning, and conducting the ratification informational meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there any other public comment? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to board management and governance. Our first action item is to approve the warning for the Starksboro withdrawal ratification vote in Bristol, Moncton, and New Haven, and each individual warning was attached to the minutes, to the agenda, I'm sorry.
I'll make that motion, Dawn. Chris?
All right, Chris, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Patrick. All right, any discussion? This was the warning that was drafted by board council. So it's put for the 3 towns that will be voting on the ratification of the Starksboro vote. No questions? No. Brad?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, I'm not sure about the, and maybe Patrick, if somebody could explain to the board, maybe with a little bit more depth about the fact that, about this issue of Lincoln not being included in the warning. It seems, I just don't know enough about why that decision was taken. My understanding is that the Lincoln sort of effort to withdraw was ratified by the state education board, and then subsequently French issued some, a letter that indicated that it was a separate district. How does that play into MAUSD and the fact that, we still have Lincoln representation on the MAUSD board? I'm asking this question because I just don't fully understand the rationale or the thinking behind excluding Lincoln from the August 9th vote. Again, it's a question of, I just don't quite understand it. If someone could help me with that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, I think Patrick's the one for that.
Yeah, and this has it's still somewhat evolving, but there was a lot of clarity that was gained last week, and a number of exchanges between board counsel and I think Starksborough's legal counsel and AOE legal counsel, and the Secretary of State's office as well. And where those exchanges landed was consensus that as of May 18th, when the state board took action on Lincoln was no longer part of MAUSD, and MAUSD consisted of 4 towns, excluding Lincoln. However, MAUSD in that order is providing education to the students in Lincoln until Lincoln is up and running. But Lincoln is no longer a member of MAUSD and therefore doesn't vote on the Starksboro ratification. So that's sort of the first part of that conversation. The second part around board membership is a question that is being considered right now in light of what we learned around the implications of the state board's action on May 18th and the fact that as of that day, Lincoln was no longer a member of MAUSD. It is a genuine question that our legal counsel is exploring further to see if there should be Lincoln reps on the MAUSD board going forward. But we still need more information on that before any decision can be enacted, and before we even know who would enact that and just how that process would work.
Okay, so I assume what you've talked to Dina about this extensively, and the fact that we still have Lincoln representation on the MAUSD board, which is voting on a sort of a warning for the August 9th vote, is not in any way going to taint or otherwise expose us legally from someone objecting to this process.
There hasn't been any concern raised by Dina on this, and the fact that it's still sort of under question as to the appropriateness of Lincoln membership on MAUSD. I suppose if the vote on the warning in the ballot is very close and a shift in what makes a quorum with or without membership, I suppose that could change things. But if this is a unanimous or very close to unanimous vote on approving the warnings in the ballots, then I don't think that slight change in membership, even if it does happen, would change the action the board's taking, and therefore probably secures any question of its sort of legality, I guess.
Yeah, I know it certainly is convoluted and complicated.
Any other questions or discussion? All right. Since we're all on video, if you can do a thumbs up or a physical thumbs up or electronic thumbs up, that would be helpful. So all those in favor of approving the warning for the Starksboro withdrawal ratification vote in Bristol, Moncton, and New Haven? Please, oh, Sarah, do you have your hand up, or is that in anticipation of the vote? Sorry, Sarah's got her hand up and I don't know if it came. Oh, okay. So all those in favor of the warning, please give a thumbs up. In favor, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in favor. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Don, this is Sandy. If you can hear me, I'm abstaining.
Okay, all right, and Brad abstains, so that's 2 abstentions. So the vote passes for the warning. The warning is approved. All right, the next item is to approve the ballot for the Starksboro withdrawal ratification vote in Bristol, Moncton, and New Haven. Is there a motion?
So moved, Krista.
I'll
Thank you, Chris.
second, Chris.
Thank you, Krista and Chris. Any discussion? Okay, not seeing any. All those in favor of approving the ballot for the Starksboro withdrawal ratification vote in Bristol, Moncton, and New Haven, please give a thumbs up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining, Don. It's Sandy.
Okay. All right. All right, the ballot is approved. Okay, and next is to approve a date for the informational meeting regarding the Starksboro withdrawal ratification vote. Krista, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I mentioned this to Don earlier. I was wondering about whether it's logistically possible for us to offer information meetings in each of the 3 towns. Thinking about the community engagement tenet of making sure that we provide opportunities for as many of our community members as possible to have their voice contribute to our conversations and decision making. I think there would be value in providing an opportunity for towns for folks to be with their neighbors and community members, to be at this information meeting, to feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and concerns. So I just wanted to raise that to this group. I understand from Patrick that we have a really tight window to do these meetings. And I don't know if Patrick, if you have any more information on whether we would need a full board quorum at each of the meetings. So it's something to discuss, but I would like to just offer that up as an option.
So the window we have to have the informational session is July 30 to August 8th. That's the 10 days prior to the vote, and we have to hold at least 1 informational session. So it is clear that we can have just 1, and we can have more than 1, but they have to be within the 10 days prior. And it's not yet clear. I've been texting back and forth with Dina. I got a message back that wasn't clear, so I sent a text back asking for greater clarity. I think I understand her message to say we do not need a quorum for informational sessions, but I just wanted to confirm.
Any other, oh, well, anything else, Krista? Before I, because we,
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering what other people think about that idea. It just as an idea, and then we could maybe figure out how that would work logistically.
I like the idea of having a separate informational meeting in each town. I think it might be a little challenging if we do need a quorum. It sounds like we don't, but I think it might be a more accommodating, welcoming setting for sharing information to do separate events.
Any other, Kevin?
I guess my question would be, I'm not against it by any stretch of the imagination, but I guess my question would be, if the presenters that have to be there, I would assume it'd be Patrick and maybe a few other people. If it's a undue burden for them as well, I think we should consider it. But if it's going to be an undue burden, then we may need to really think about it.
Steve?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, we have informational meetings on district issues as a regular, point of business for the budget, for, all sorts of things in, one setting, and anybody can come to it. I think in the time frame we have, we're asking a lot of people to try to put up 3 meetings together and get around all 3 meetings. It might allow people to sort of be better prepared to do one.
Sarah?
I apologize. I'm in my car. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I actually think it would be more effective to go to each town if we were able to make it happen, but really have like a time, maybe like end in Bristol. So like if you had, go to Moncton for 30 minutes and New Haven for 30 minutes and then go to Bristol. So if people have more questions, it could extend that time in that town. I do, or for the whole district. I do think that this is a town by town vote. It's not a district vote. So it would make more sense to be by town.
Thank you. Krista?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I appreciate your thoughts, Steve. But I recall that when we did the work with Sue McCormick, we spent time going to town by town and talking individually separately with students and with staff, and then we came together as a district. And I just know our communities are really interconnected, and it can be difficult when you have an opinion that differs from a friend or neighbor in the next town. And I also just, again, really think it's super important for us to challenge ourselves to be inconvenienced if it means that more people's voices can be at the table.
I'm looking for board members I haven't heard from.
I will just add one complicating factor, not impossible, but a complicating factor is that 4 of the 6 weeknights, assuming we wanted to try and do this on a weeknight, that are within that 10-day window are the admin retreat that we have annually. In this year it's in Stowe. So that just adds a logistical challenge, and that's going to be a week where 2 of those days we're going to start digging a fair bit deeper with Nate in the work we're doing with him. Again, something we can work around, but a factor.
Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Krista's sentiment. I just worry about the logistics and trying to put together a good presentation without stretching our resources too thin.
Thank you, Brad. So let's see, I haven't heard from Bailey or Chris. Bailey.
Hi, I really feel like I agree with Krista, and I know in my world, field days is coming up, and I know that can really in completely take over a lot of people's lives. So I hate to shorten the window even more, but I think we need to figure out how to reach the most voices. And I know our time frame just keeps shrinking. And I don't know that online works for everybody. And I don't know that going to a central location with multiple towns works for everybody. So I really want to make sure that this information gets to the most people. So I think going to each town is really important.
Thank you. Chris?
I was just wondering if we could host Zoom meetings earlier in the evening or late afternoon in like New Haven and Moncton, and then have an in-person meeting in Bristol that evening. So it's all on one day, and those that are away have the opportunity to tune in from wherever they are and get the information. And those that are in person can come to Bristol and get the information there.
And Sarah?
I was going to add that I got a lot of positive feedback about our merger video and how it helps reach a lot of people. So I'm curious if we'd be able to do something much, much shorter, but that would be able to be used for the same, like it's an informational purpose, and then have Q&A at a different time, but at least be able to provide that.
Krista, your hand was up. Are you all set?
Well, I was, but can I just ask Sarah, did you guys do the video and then the Q&A at the same time? Or was it like a mass marketing push around the video and then Q&A at a separate time?
The video is totally separate because anybody can watch it at any point, but it's, you know, it's something that you can at least attach to Front Porch Forum, or you can link to something, and then you have to do Q&A. It depended on how you're working it, but it could be an option for us to provide the video and then do Q&A. We did that as a way to have consistent presentations, and then it was a way to be able to be used later on.
All right. Sandy?
Thanks, Don. I don't have a strong position either way in terms of doing it town by town or doing one meeting. I think there's pros and cons that have been voiced on both logistics and then, obviously wanting to reach as many people as possible. I think those are all good goals. I do have a question though, in terms, there was a mention of who would be presenting, and I was wondering what role, or are we including a role of letting Starksboro speak for themselves as well at these informational meetings? And the only reason I raise that is because I don't know if that will then present any logistical or scheduling issues.
Thanks, Sandy. Erin?
I was just thinking about all the information we had collected, Krista, from the community engagement stuff and the thought exchange, and wondering if there's a way to sort of make an FAQ type list and sort of put in some answers into that if we are going to make any sort of presentation or video that might expedite some of the kind of routine questions that we've been getting through those programs and those exchanges. But I agree with Krista's sentiment too, that I think that it's important that each town has their own voice and has their own time to talk openly amongst themselves and with board representatives. So even though it's a lot, would really love to see that each town gets their time to talk.
Sandy, is your hand up from before, or is?
Yeah, it was up from before. Sorry, Doug.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
take it down.
Krista?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm kind of liking this idea of the video and then having just maybe an hour and a half total, like 30-minute Q&As that are for each I think virtual probably makes the most sense for people to access, but, trying to set aside a specific time, maybe in one evening for each town to dial in and have a chance to have their Q&A. But I'm wondering, Patrick, what you think as far as what would be the lighter lift for you and your team, as far as if we wanted to try to, hearing these different ideas, and if we're trying to find a way to accommodate connections with each town, which idea seems like the most feasible for you?
So I'll just add that in the back and forth I'm having with Dina, it looks like it's a yes, actually. She's thinking right now that we do need a quorum for each informational session. So we can factor that into the conversation. But I'm kind of a fan of multiple in a day. That just, especially if there's going to be anything in person, traveling from the admin meeting to whatever the physical location is and traveling back to the Bristol area once to do multiple meetings, I think eases some of the logistics. I'm torn on the remote versus in person. I think remote is much simpler in many ways, and there's something lost in the kind of interaction you have on a screen versus in person. So I'm really torn between the two. Probably hybrid is the best. It has its own complications trying to run hybrid meetings, as we all well know. But I think we have the technology pretty well figured out to do that, so that we can accommodate in person as many people as we can, because I think that provides the best environment for a discussion. And for those that just can't make it in person for lots of good reasons, to have that virtual option as well is probably the best way to get the most people engaged, which at the end of the day is really, I think, what our goal is.
Erin, you were.
Yeah, just a question. Does this information get put out like in newspaper or print anywhere else, or is it really just we rely on these informational sessions to reach people?
We could definitely get information out in multiple ways. This is a legal requirement for us to have an informational session ahead of a vote, but it doesn't have to be our only mechanism for sharing information.
So at this item in the agenda, we're about picking a date. So we're sort of in the realm of the discussion of the planning of the informational meeting, but if we could pick a date that worked the easiest for Patrick and his team, that would be a good place to start. And then when we get a little further on down the agenda, we could talk about the discussion of the direction of that meeting.
Can we do the 8th? Oh, I didn't raise my hand. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Krista.
You said July 30th until the 8th. Does that mean that's so late? Oy. What date do you propose, Patrick?
I'm looking at my calendar now. The date I was shooting for fell just outside of our 10-day window. I was hoping for July 28th to get ahead of admin retreat, field days week, etc. But unfortunately, that missed the 10-day window. So I'm taking a look at the calendar now. Give me 2 minutes and I'll come back with an idea.
Okay, well, Patrick's doing that. Board members, we don't have another public comment scheduled, and Nancy has had her hand up. Is there any objection to hearing a short comment from Nancy?
No.
Nancy?
No.
Thank you. I think you've all put forward some great ideas, and I think we'd be perfectly ready to help with any of those. I would say that while I absolutely agree that hybrid is, if it works well, is in some ways, even though it's tricky, it's the best way to get the most people. In recent times, the sound has been very tricky, and I think I don't know if there's a fix for it, but when you're participating in a hybrid meeting, very often it's very difficult. If you're participating remotely, it's often very difficult to hear people who are attending in person. So I think, and it's just so important for everybody to hear everybody in this conversation. So that would be part of it. So I would support anything that you think will work for you.
It's not clear to me yet if we're doing 1 or 3, and if it's the same day or different days. If either it's 1 or 3 and they're all on the same day, the day that I would recommend is August 4th.
You said
That's
the 4th?
August 4th. That's the last day of our admin retreat, and I can be back in Bristol in time to participate in multiple meetings for the whole evening. So if we could pull it off in one day, however many meetings that might be, then that would be the day that I would recommend.
Okay, Krista?
So Patrick, what time would you be able to be back on that day?
I would make whatever we come up with here work. I'll work around this.
And if we were trying to be in person or hybrid, it would be at 3 different places. So first one, then the other, then the third. So that probably needs a how many hour window?
I think we should plan on an hour being needed at each site.
Yep.
Even if 3 people show up, we could spend an hour discussing any number of things.
Yep.
And then we'll need some travel and setup time in between those sessions. So I think if we're going to 3 places, we probably need at least a 4-hour window, start to finish.
Mhm. To Nancy's point, I was thinking about what we used in Moncton and New Haven. I think both places had those things you wear around your neck that we sort of passed around, where I think the quality of audio was pretty good.
Yeah.
And we had heard a little bit from the last board meeting about some of the audio challenges. We've been discussing, I think there's a way to attach microphones to the owl, and we can have microphones kind of distributed around the room, and that may help pick up audio a little bit better.
So right now, can we get, it sounds like the 4th might be the best place to start for planning that informational, the date. So that is what we need in a motion.
So move, Steve.
Steve, all right. Okay.
Second, Bailey.
Bailey. All right. Any further discussion about August 4th, 2022 as the information, setting the date for the informational meeting? All right. I'm not seeing any. So all those in favor of August 4th as the date for the informational meeting, please give a thumbs up or say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that passes. Okay. All right, the next item is a discussion on the direction regarding the informational meeting.
Yeah, I can set some context for this.
Sure.
So I'm assuming you'd like me highly involved in those informational sessions. I've given you some information about the sort of financials and other impacts that we've put together here in our office. So if there's any feedback on that or direction around content, that would be helpful. And then you heard Nancy speak earlier about their interest in working with us. So I would want some direction from this board as to whether or not that was something you wanted us to participate in or not. I think What is clear is when it became known that MAUSD was responsible for holding this vote, all aspects of this vote are the responsibility of MAUSD, which includes the legally obligated informational session. So I don't think there's any requirement to sort of partner with anyone, but it's certainly an option if this board was interested in that happening.
Okay, board members?
Well, I guess I would
Brad.
need to, I would, go ahead, Brad.
Brad?
Well, I mean, I think it would be just prudent to sort of, talk to the Starksboro School, the SOS committee, and get their input for the, for whatever is presented at the information setting. I mean, I think that, I was a little bit struck, Patrick, by your presentation last week about, what the ramifications are for a ratification of Starksboro's withdrawal. I mean, again, I haven't dived deeply into the numbers, but it did seem somewhat, it contrasted from what my recollection was when you made similar presentations about Starksboro and Lincoln, back in last summer's retreat. So, again, I think that there are a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainties about the future. So, and I think Nancy raised some pretty good points during the public comment section. So again, I would think that there's really nothing to lose by collaborating with with the Starksboro folks.
Okay. Thanks, Brad. Kevin?
I've got to speak my piece and leave because I've got another meeting. I've got a hard stop for another meeting. When Lincoln left, I was like, go for it. I don't care. But the whole debate at the state board level has changed my attitude towards the Starksboro issue, fair or unfair. When the state board starts talking about deconstructing our supervisory district, if Starksboro leaves, that is a big impact to the 3 towns that are going to be voting. And all of a sudden, that impact is not aligned with any sort of harmless little activity that Starksboro is proposing to separate. The impact is significant. I don't think it's Starksboro's issue to try to massage. I think it's totally up to the board. And I just see the SOS group running interference with a big issue that this district has to grapple with as to whether we're going to risk deconstruction or not.
Thank you, Kevin. Patrick?
Yeah, I guess my feeling is that ultimately, sorry, I'm assuming you were referring to me.
Yes.
I guess my feeling is that ultimately I do feel like it's the the board's responsibility to put forward our position and to have that be in the forefront. But I also think Nancy did bring up some good points, and I think those are questions that are I think we all are going to have to answer, and I think that they're valid questions. I don't think probably there are some nuances that will be difficult to dig into with the time that we would have at the informational sessions, but certainly being anticipating what the questions would be and trying to be prepared so that we can have well-informed responses makes a lot of sense. So I guess what I'm coming to is that I think it would be worth, my feeling is it would be worth sort of collecting the input of the Favorite Schools Starksboro group, and then but ultimately the MAUSD board sort of coming up with the what is included in the informational section.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Sarah,
I think that it's our information session and it becomes very confusing if people ask a question about who has the ability to answer any of the questions. And so therefore, I feel like it should be only our information session.
Krista,
I really appreciate what Patrick said. I think that it's important for us to understand to the best of our ability some of the questions that Nancy's raised, and to understand why our administration is presenting the numbers the way they are. And I think it's really important for us to understand that, because my sense is that we're not going to come to total agreement and alignment on these numbers. And ultimately, we as a board need to have confidence in why they might be different and understand that. You know, I think that it may be that there are some things that we can't know. It's probably really likely that there are things we can't know. It's always been that way. And so you do have to make some assumptions. But it doesn't change the fact that we have declining enrollment and increasing costs. And if you have a two fewer towns in your district, it costs more to run the district. And so I think it's really important to suss out some of those nuances, because I think that the folks that are advocating for withdrawal are probably going to really try to, capitalize on those differences, is making the information from administration be untrustworthy or not believable. And that's unfortunate. I think in the end, we're trying to all just figure out what makes most sense moving forward in a sustainable way. But if, Patrick, to the degree that which you can take Nancy's questions and try to address them for us, maybe by email, since we won't have another meeting before this info session, that would be really helpful.
thank you, Krista. It's Steve. I did not forget about you. You just keep hopping around. Steve, go.
Yeah, so obviously we don't want this to turn into the war of the information sessions. We put out one story in the information session, and then SOS goes around and tells a whole different story. It would be good to maybe spread this information around a little bit, get it as in sync as we can before we make our position in the meeting public. And maybe just acknowledge where there's some ambiguity or some differences that, are a little bit undetermined, or there's some margin for error, or whatever we want to say about, where we might come out differently on a particular topic. And I don't know how that would actually occur without some collaboration with SOS ahead of time. Just maybe a draft version of the thing gets sent out, and at least give them an opportunity to comment on it, so that we're not, butting heads about the information session afterwards. I think that we have an opportunity potentially to avoid some of that.
Patrick, do you still have your hand up? Or is that a new hand?
I think one of the questions that I think is important to keep in mind here is we need to be thinking about what will the constituents in each town be looking for information. Do they want information from MAUSD that speaks to what the impact of a Starksboro withdrawal would be? Do they want information from Starksboro SOS, or do they want information from both? I don't know, but the purpose of this is to provide members of each of the 3 voting towns with information that they're looking for to make an informed vote.
Brad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me over the last, year or so, and we've talked, over and over about the, I don't, sort of the perceived, whether it's real or not, lack of transparency and lack of, sort of confidence that school board is working in the best interests of the, of the communities involved. So, I mean, I think, my sense is, I'm all for, laying all the facts out on the table, getting as much information as we can for, for the voters of the three towns. And I don't see any real downside to that. If we come across as saying, oh, well, this is, our information setting, quote unquote, I think that puts off people. And say, well, what are they, if they're saying it's our information setting, then, what are they trying to hide? Are there facts out there that, we ought to be, considering? So again, my view is that I think is within the restrictions that are imposed on us by the time frame, I think there's no real downside to, collaborating with outside groups, whether it's SOS or anybody else, to the extent that we can. I mean, again, I recognize that we only have, a few weeks until this takes place. But I would be very wary of, sort of, trying to, sort of, dictate to our communities that, this is an MAUSD deal and this is our position, and, it's our way or the highway.
Thank you, Brad. Krista.
I think my concern is that we're going to have areas of disagreement. I mean, I think by virtue of the withdrawal effort, I think Starksborough's had to, convince their community of potential impact and our community of a potential impact. And so in that advocacy, I just don't see how we're going to agree on all of the points. And so I think that it's going to be really hard to collaborate, but I do think that it's important for us to understand where there are divergences of opinion, what our administration's thinking is behind that, so that we can be more confident in that. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of places where there's really different feelings about what we heard originally, or at least that's what I'm starting to hear from folks. And so I guess I just want to know more about those differences and what our superintendent and finance folks are, why they're presenting the information the way they are. Because I'm concerned we won't be able to find shared understanding on all of those differences.
Okay. Bailey or Chris, do you want to add any to this discussion? Looks like Sandy.
Thanks. Excuse me. I finally made it home with good internet connection. So I guess my thought is that I'm trying to think of myself as a neutral voter who's undecided and is going to this informational meeting, trying to really put myself in their shoes. And they just want to hear, both sides, or both, even if there's some differing sides, they want to hear how are they presenting it, what seems, that what may resonate with me as being more reliable, what seems to make sense. And, that's, to me, it would be good, whether or not we can have consensus, it's still important to make sure all the voices are heard, so that people who are truly like, I really don't know which way I want to go, feel that they've gotten the full story from both sides. And then that way they don't, they really may, like, we do this work, so we have concerns and we have a lot of information, but I'm thinking about that voter who just wants to hear it and make a decision and vote, based on what they hear. So I would just encourage whatever method it is that makes sure that we make sure all the voices are heard.
Thank you, Sandy. Bailey or Chris? wait a minute. Krista.
Yeah, sorry, just one more thing. I think that it would be great if Patrick were able to share their thinking around the numbers with us, to also include that in the presentation, to Sandy's point. Like, I think people really do need to understand what those assumptions are based on. I think that's really important.
Patrick, are you feeling like you need any other direction or sort of points that you need to understand the board's position?
Where my mind is going right now is sort of along the lines of what Krista has been saying. So if that resonates with most board members, then I think that's fine. I think the depth of sort of the context and assumptions around the information I shared at the last meeting is important, and we can certainly put that together. I think that essentially addresses the questions that Nancy raised at the beginning. And that feels most appropriate to me, right? It would seem unusual to me that, for example, the Starksboro Save Our Schools group would present to the other towns the impact on them if Starksboro were to withdraw. That seems a little bit out of place. It certainly seems in place for MAUSD to do that, and to do that in a way that addresses Nancy's questions seems appropriate. And I think that's kind of what Krista was getting at. So that's the takeaway where I'm coming from right now. So if that is inconsistent with what this board wants, then I guess I want to know that.
Steve.
Yeah, so the only thing that I want to avoid is us putting together something, having the information sessions, and then having, SOS basically put out a whole nother position, poking holes at everything that you just said in the meeting. I'm not sure that helps. I mean, I know Lincoln had to conduct their own information sessions for all the rest of for that particular vote, because it was their responsibility at that point. So I don't know why SOS wouldn't have the ability to conduct their own information session if they wished, which might be counterproductive, only in that, voters will be getting sort of different information from different groups and not knowing who to understand. So that's all. The only reason why I'm saying that if there could be some at least initial review of the presentation by SOS, you could at least cut some of that potential out, and potentially at least address where there are differences in the presentation.
Sandy.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify that when I say, and I apologize because I missed part of the meeting because I lost internet connection, so I might have missed something. But when I was saying I wanted all the voices to be heard, I do think it's important, since it's MAUSD's responsibility, to do the presentation, to do the numbers, to go through all that information. But I may have missed, but I do think that Starksboro Save Our Schools should also be presenting at these meetings. And in these meetings, they can respond to each other almost like a debate if there needs to be one, so people can hear it. I know I come from a judicial situation where the way we do it in courts is we allow both sides. Sometimes they agree to things and sometimes they disagree to some things. And the way that people make a decision is they weigh the arguments and they go, okay, I think I know which way I'm going to go. And so if I guess when I was saying all voices is I'm encouraging that Save Our Schools be present at these informational meetings and be a part of it, to avoid some of the concerns I think that Steve raised, and then to also make sure that we have transparency and at the same time get it all done in this very short time frame that we have.
Thank you, Sandy. Patrick, Lawrence.
I think I tend to lean a little bit more towards toward what Steve was saying. I think there's going to be it's probably inevitable that there's going to be some differences of interpretation and opinion on the numbers and what's presented. I think the question becomes, is the most appropriate venue for that the informational session to have that discussion, which I think it's healthy to have a discussion and have multiple perspectives, certainly. But I think the question becomes, is it most appropriate to have that, to have that debate at an informational session, or whether it's more, due to the fact that MAUSD has kind of the obligation to organize these informational sessions, whether it makes more sense to, certainly the Save Our Schools committee or group could organize their own and certainly present that information as well. I realize it's not perhaps as efficient, but I guess I feel a little wary of having the way that you described it, Sandy, having it be a kind of like a back and forth. I feel like that almost has a higher risk of becoming adversarial. I could be wrong about that. And I don't think I don't think that people want that to happen. I'm just concerned about, having further division. So.
Steve?
Well, and also in an hour, it's difficult to debate a lot of these points. There's a lot of information here. And if we were to basically have a debate where each side presented information that hadn't even been reviewed by the other side, that could take all day. So I think we really want to just find where there's common ground in the information that either side would present. And then if there's not common ground, then potentially we say, this is their opinion, this is our opinion. And at least that way, people understand that voice has been recognized, and they can follow up however they feel is most appropriate with that for them.
Thanks, Steve. Krista?
Something I've been thinking about, and I don't know how to articulate it well, but and I don't know how you could do this, Patrick, but you're asking for feedback on the content, and something that I feel like has been missing is, there's a lot of focus on what we might lose and what we're trying to hold on to. And I wish there were a way to talk more about what we stand to gain when we all stay together. Currently, it's really hard to, in my opinion, having 3 kids at different stages of our education system, it's really hard for us, I believe, to do all the amazing things that we want to do because it costs a lot. And I'll share a personal example, which is for my daughter, who I spoke to her before this meeting, and I asked her permission to share this because I think it's important that I don't share her story without her permission. But here's a kid who's been at Mount Abe she's going to be a junior now, so since she was in 7th grade, and is really dealing with unequal access to that learning space. And that's because we don't have the community capital and will to invest in that building. When the bond came up, a lot of the questions were about, well, how can we be doing this when we have lots of school buildings that are half full and the Mount Abe itself isn't totally full? And I think if we try to imagine what we want for all of our kids, what we want to be able to build and do together for all of our kids, for my daughter to be able to be in a space that really allows her to move through a school building along with her peers and not in a separate corridor, in a dark, small elevator that moves really slow, that's only on one end of the building. That takes an investment. That takes a significant investment. It's really, really hard to make those investments when our system is really small and when things cost a lot. And there are lots of other examples like AP courses or different languages or outdoor learning that folks really want. They want to see those in our system, and they're going other places because they're not there. And I feel like I wish there were a way to point out not just what we stand to lose, but like what we stand to gain when we just keep fracturing ourselves, that our resources together can really build something really great. And I believe that we haven't been able to do that because it costs a lot and we don't have a lot of kids in our system. So this is a tangent, but I felt like I needed to say it, to say, I don't know where you put that into the story, Patrick, of where we're headed and what the future is that we're trying to build, because we focus so much on potential loss and so little on where we want to go. So I guess that's all I'm going to say.
Right. Board members, Nancy has her hand up again. Are you willing to hear from her? Okay, Nancy, you have a minute.
Thanks. I think we stand to gain a lot if we can stay together, and I truly hope that we can. On the question of the informational meeting, I may be wrong about this, but I've always thought of informational meetings as a way to compensate for having to vote by Australian ballot. That is, in a town meeting, information is presented. There's a town moderator who moderates the meeting. Everything is addressed to the moderator, the way Pam Marsh runs the informational meetings for the district. And people ask questions and give opinions, and it's a way to provide some of what a town meeting provides where people can come together and learn about a question and think about it together and disagree with each other sometimes, and then decide how they're going to vote. So, that's what I would hope that the informational meeting would provide that opportunity and provide that kind of a context. I do want to say that I think because of the nature of the withdrawal and the conditions for stopping the withdrawal that our voters voted on, it's very tricky to project what the outcome, especially what the cost outcome will be, the cost impact will be on the other towns, because to do that, one would be projecting really what an impact will be in 24 and 25. And that is far enough away, and there are enough moving parts here that you have to make assumptions. You have to say, well, this is maybe more likely than that. And so being honest about what we can know and what we're not sure of, and what therefore we have to make assumptions about, is important for people to hear, because we none of us, neither you nor we in Starksboro, are sure of what the legislature is going to do, or what the implementation timeline is going to be for the waiting study and how that's going to play out. So we have to make some assumptions, and we wish we could say it's going to be this and not have to qualify it, but that's not entirely honest. And so that's why I think it's important to lay out the assumptions and talk about whether they're too optimistic, too pessimistic, somewhere in between, all of that, because it's a complicated issue and it's tricky.
Thank you. Bailey.
One of the things that really struck me at our last meeting was I almost felt like afraid of the future of Starksville leaving with all of the numbers. And I felt like what Steve was saying about the merger, what they're trying to get in place now is that there would be some protection for individual schools. And I feel like that is a really important part, because I do know there's community members who are thinking, yeah, Starksville should be able to do what they want. These are their kids. This is their school. This is their town. And we just have to figure out the rest. And I feel like if they knew, maybe if they heard those numbers and they knew that there was also protection for all of our towns within that merger piece, that it might just feel like, oh, okay, maybe there is a different way to still support small schools and still go together forward as a group instead of becoming so disjointed. And I'm not quite sure, how to make that sound better than I said it, but that might be an important piece.
Thanks, Bailey. Patrick Green, do you mentioned earlier, I mean, are you feeling like you have a starting place, or?
I think so, and sort of now taking what Krista's thoughts were and kind of combining that with Steve's thoughts around, and actually a little bit of Patrick's thoughts. I'm concerned about a back and forth and debate, both from a time perspective, but also just how that plays out. But I think putting together the information, the presentation, the context, et cetera, sharing it with Starksboro Save Our Schools so that there can be both perspectives represented at least, in whatever way that might take shape, is very doable.
Okay. Sandy?
Thanks, Dawn. I just wanted to follow up to say, I was curious to know what other people thought of Nancy's suggestion of a moderator. I thought that sounded sort of like an excellent idea personally, if that were possible. Only because it allows us not to go into debate, but to help encourage participation, sort of like she mentioned when we have big budget meetings. And do the same work that Patrick's going to do, but maybe consider adding a moderator.
All right, thank you. That may involve a little extra work because the school district is in need of a moderator. So, Steve.
At our budget information meetings, doesn't Patrick normally sort of act as the moderator? I mean, it's a Q&A session. Usually we do a presentation, then there's a Q&A at the end, which I would assume we would have here anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming in that hour, we might have a half-hour presentation and a half-hour of Q&A, which can end up being debate-like if it's not moderated. So I guess that's the question is, does Patrick want to be the moderator, or Dawn, or somebody else, without having to drag a third party into this?
Yeah, I guess that was the difference I was seeing between this and our usual budget discussion, Steve, is typically when I present a budget and people have questions for really Floyd or I about the budget presentation, it's a Q&A to either board or community and Floyd or I. There isn't that sort of third entity that's sort of in the mix that I think is sort of a change in the way this would flow if I was a presenter and the moderator in this scenario. And I concur with Don's thoughts that first we'd have to find a moderator and have them come to 3 meetings, or potentially, I guess, have 3 different moderators.
I'm wondering if maybe as this starts, the work starts I cannot think. As the work is as you undertake the work, it almost feels like we might need another meeting to just wrap our head around the logistics and maybe even the board to see the content before we're sitting at that meeting. Krista.
I hate to say it, but I like that idea. I was wondering, one of my questions was going to be, how can we have a chance to hear this presentation before the community to make sure we all really understand it? So there's well, I guess it really depends on Patrick's schedule, but I was going to say that we do have a community engagement committee meeting the first Tuesday of August. So if we wanted to use that time to do this, because it is community engagement, that would be fine with me, but I don't know how that works for your schedule, Patrick.
I was almost wondering about that 28th date, Patrick, because you were thinking that date originally. I was wondering if that allows for the board to sort of look at things and wrap their head around it.
That's what I was thinking, was that week of the 25th anyway. It doesn't have to be the 28th, but that week is when I would request that we have the meeting if we're going to be adding one.
Will that work for people if that week, or are 8 of you all gone or away?
Should we do a thumbs to see if people agree with having a meeting, and if so, that date works?
Yep. Are board members in favor of another July meeting? Thumbs up if you.
No.
We have a thumbs down.
Does it have to be at night? Like, is this something that needs to take place at 6 p.m.? I'm just not as available in the summer, in July, at this hour.
Bailey?
I'm pretty available that entire week, I guess. As early as 4.
All right. So it looks like we could pull together a meeting that week. Maybe we could.
Yeah, it would have to be in the evening for me.
Okay. Okay, so stay tuned while we look at calendars and maybe we can send a poll out and see which one would work the best for people.
Sorry, I have a question.
Sure, Erin.
If we do pull together that meeting, would it be prudent to also invite Starksboro SOS to that meeting, get their platform, then have a conversation with them then, an open forum where people can hear both sides there, and then hold our informationals?
I think that's a good idea. Sounds like a good idea. Sandy?
Oh, I was trying to put a thumbs up. I like that idea.
Okay. All right. Nancy, is your hand up about that date?
Sorry, the date was the 28th?
Well, the last week in July.
Yeah. I think that the 28th or the 29th would be best. But I also just wanted to say, I hope it's possible to consider having, the way we used to do district-wide budget meetings or supervisory union budget meetings is we had a moderator The moderator called the meeting to order. The superintendent was invited to present on the budget. And then the moderator opened it to the floor for questions. And sometimes that she invited the superintendent to answer the questions. Sometimes she'd invite someone else. People got to speak. So the superintendent, I mean, so the moderator kind of helps deflect any heat that gets going or could get going. We have, if we're talking about 3 different towns and 3 different meetings, we have probably 3 different moderators in each of the, moderator in each of those towns who might be willing to moderate this meeting. And it wouldn't prevent the superintendent from making a presentation. It wouldn't prevent, it would be an opportunity for people to ask questions and challenge each other. And if that's what's to be, and it would be an opportunity, sure, for Starksboro SOS or anyone else to present information. So having a moderator might be a nice, a piece of the process that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. All right, so it sounds like we'll have another meeting, and maybe Patrick and I can touch base with the town moderators and see if some might be willing to help. Okay. All right, so the next thing on our agenda is the meeting evaluation.
Sorry, Dawn, I just had a quick question. Was it August 4th? Was that the date, Patrick? August 4th was what we
Yes.
were looking at for? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
For the informational session, and then the last week of July for the additional board meeting.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have the evaluation up that they could run it through it? Okay, Chris, awesome.
What is the level of engagement of all board members, high or low?
Getting thumbs up.
Okay. I was gonna say not everybody all at once. Was the agenda followed, yes or no?
Yep, thumbs.
Any comments? Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board, yes or no? Any comments? Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process? Yes or no? Any comments? Other feedback for the chair? What went well with the meeting? Suggestions to improve future meetings? And that's it.
Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn at 7:19.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Or I'll second. Krista can take it.
All right, thank you. All those in favor of adjourning at 7:19, please say, hey, give me a thumbs up or say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.